a stop to that. Jay, I think this is where I want you to cue up Beethoven's second movement. All right, we're almost there. By the way, they're not yet graduated. I have to finish. Then they have to move their tassels. Until that happens, they're just students. So the presidential charge. Loyalty. Loyalty is a word I have always loved. What sort of man would not love the word? And more to the point, the truth behind the word. Loyalty and loyal are words ancient in our language and civilization. They rise up from the English tongue with a light French accent, but from grave classical meaning. From at least the late 14th century, loyalty meant the quality of a man who was honest, held to his word, of consistent character. Loyalty and loyal came from the Latin, legalitas and lex, the law, a deeply Roman word. Yet even behind this word is the Indo-European root lig, that which is bound together, united, unbroken. Loyalty is one of those primal things which abides and stirs the hearts of men. It is earned slowly and lost tragically. In the British legal and political tradition, loyalty was compared and contrasted with allegiance. Allegiance being a bond based upon defined conduct, a positive thing, but not as deep as loyalty. Loyalty was based on conduct and deeper convictions. Allegiance indicates an important but very basic temporal agreement. Loyalty reveals not simply the visible actions, but the heart and soul of a person. Now, some of you know that I have a love of history and an interest in genealogy. So I'll tell you a story rooted in both. There was a man named William Pepperell. He's an ancestor of mine by accident, in the sense that we all have many ancestors. But he's an interesting man. A man who lived in Kittery, Maine in the 18th century. He was a shipbuilder, a soldier, a statesman in colonial New England, who loved Maine and loved his king. In his career, he rose to power and authority, and was the only Native American given military authority over both colonial militia and British regulars during the French and Indian Wars. Under his command, the French fortress of Louisbourg in Nova Scotia fell. This was a grueling siege, and for his service he was granted by King George II a baronet, Sir William Pepperell. The town of Pepperell, Massachusetts is named after him. Although tension was evident between Parliament and colonial interests, he found a way to remain true to his loyalty to family and region, and his allegiance to king. He is buried an hour's distance from here, overlooking the sea. His son-in-law and adopted heir, William Sparhawk, was not so fortunate. As the winds of rebellion and war swept through New England, Sparhawk chose allegiance as the path to preserve loyalty and affection. He remained true to the British Empire, leaving behind his native birthplace, like a third of Americans. His wife died of smallpox while in Nova Scotia. Sparhawk would never remarry, but from his new home in London, he sought to help other loyalist exiles, and with William Wilberforce, established the British and Foreign Bible Society, a non-denominational charity for the distribution of scripture among the poor. But he died in exile, always considering himself an American. On the same stretch of coast in Maine, there are McKennies and Jordans, cousins to the Pepperells, also ancestors of mine. Like the Pepperells, they were loyal to their families and to Maine. But they gave their allegiance to a new government which was seeking independence from Parliament. William McKinney tightly aligned his loyalties with this new allegiance. He served in the defense of Falmouth against the British, the siege of Boston. He joined the Continental Army. He fought in the Ticonderoga and Saratoga campaigns. He served under Washington at Valley Forge and at the Battle of Monmouth. And after 7 years of hard service, he mustered out as a captain. Like William Pepperell, he's buried overlooking the sea. I honor these ancestors who had, each of them, agonizing choices and much suffering. They demonstrate to me that loyalty and allegiance are not always simple to align. Their loyalties are admirable, and even their differing allegiances are understandable. But I must admit, I find their loyalties more compelling. Loyalty. There are 4 ships that I have found. Some of you know I have a love of the sea and ships. There are 4 ships that I found that bore the name the Loyalty since the 17th century. The most famous was the HMS Loyalty, commissioned in 1943. She was a minesweeper and a submarine hunter. Imagine, if you will, serving on this ship. Her operations included protecting convoys off the coast of Iceland, clearing explosive mines from the coast of Scotland, the North Sea, and the Channel, and, best of all, acting as a decoy. In Operation Starkey, for example, her duty was to distract enemy aircraft from the buildup of the Allied fleet preparing for the invasion of Normandy. During these operations, she took fire from German and Allied guns, but the Allied gunnery was better and nearly sank her. Sorry, Dennis. After being refitted, she participated in the invasion of Europe, clearing Gold Beach for the Allied forces, and then remained in the region to take the brunt of any attack launched against transport ships. These duties of placing herself between vulnerable ships and hostile enemy craft continued over the next month. In August of 1944, while protecting the sea lanes, she was torpedoed and sank, with the loss of her captain, Lieutenant Commander James Edward Malby, and 18 men. One cannot imagine that Malby, or those men who died protecting comrades, would have been inspired by the concept of mere allegiance. But loyalty is different. Why all these stern thoughts and words on graduation day? What do ships of war and issues of loyalty and allegiance have to do with us? Well, I remind you of old Dr. Ardmeyer, the Greek professor in Wendell Berry's novel, Jayber Crow, who, in trying to help Crow discern his vocation in the face of confusion, says to him that we are always called to things, but not always to the things we think. Quote, "You have been given questions to which you cannot be given answers. You will have to live them out, perhaps a little at a time." All this education, Dr. Fahey, just more questions and puzzles. That would be a fair enough criticism. This is the president's charge, not a tutorial. A charge, the fixing of bayonets and a whiff of black powder. Now is the crisis moment, when you move from the quiet confines of leisure to the field of action. Many presidents on this day give a sort of gladsome speech to their soon-to-be graduates. The world is your oyster. Go forth and conquer. Be the vision that you seek, and other such palaver and platitudes. On this day, before the idols of those tall gods, career, popularity, power, and success, another generation of young people are laid, bound in sacrifice. It's not that I don't hope for your flourishing, or that you have a nice career, or that people like you, or that you have influence. Mr. Jackson gets nervous at this speech, at this moment, because he wants some of you to go into finance and make stacks of money. Right? Someone has to support the next generation's scholarship fund. It's not that I hope that you don't flourish, but I care more for your happiness. and I just don't like lying like most presidents. I love reading presidential speeches. They're just dreadful. Right. So instead, I shall do as I've done a few times before. I'll tell you about a walk. I usually go on a specific walk about a week or two before graduation, before things get terribly busy, in the hopes that before all the chaos that's going to come flooding in, I can strike upon some image or idea in the quiet of the walk. Now, many of you know near my house, there are a series of interlocking ponds that on the old maps are called Hayden Pond and Horseshoe Pond. But my family and I call part of one end Stumpy Pond because of a snag of trees back there, or just the pond. This pond is very old. As I say, it's found on the first colonial maps and first descriptions of my village of Hollis. There were sawmills there to cut the timber in the 18th century and afterwards to grind the grain. But the ponds were preceded, the English sawmill ponds were preceded by beaver ponds. These ponds are simply built upon that which the beavers had already built. Colonial spillways were simply imitating and perfecting what man found in nature. When we moved to our part of the village, we fell in love with the pond. It's a very pleasant walk, and the pond itself sustained a massive ecological system. And then one day, as I would learn, in response to a United Nations resolution, and as I knew from funding from the Obama administration, our town accepted a nice government grant to tear apart the colonial spillway that had, in imitation of the beaver dam, kept the pond stable for 2 centuries. The spillway would be replaced by a plastic tunnel with some faux stone siding, but really it was just a drain. Some of the older stonework was placed along the sides, I suppose, to give the shoddy modern work the appearance of tradition and stability. What had been a thriving pond within a few days was a mudflat reeking with death, as the entire household of nature collapsed under the well-financed machinery of government funding and progress. There are Troy Chathams in every town. Over the past 3 or 4 years, we've witnessed the return of Castor canadensis, the North American beaver. Slowly, section by section, a beaver restored the pond system, culminating in a thick dam built athwart that modern culvert. Over the course of several years, the pond was gloriously restored. From scarcely visible phytoplankton up to blue heron, the beaver pond supported scores of flora and fauna. Now my walk. Early one morning, I approached the pond. Immediately, I could see there were problems. The water was low. The shoreline stretched out towards the center. Once submerged skeletal trees were visible. The pond system was already fragmenting into muddy pools connected by a slow stream. I went to the dam and beheld the handiwork, or rather the machine work, of the town Public Works Authority. Sections of the dam had been removed by a backhoe and a deep gash cut to the bottom of the stream bed. Water was rushing through the plastic culvert. Doom fell upon the pond. Doom upon all the life sustained by the pond. Doom because some fool of a man who had no loyalty to something so beautiful tore open the carefully woven dam. Could I blame this man? I'm reminded of the lines in a Thomas Hardy poem, A Broken Appointment. You did not come, you love me not, and love alone can lend you loyalty. Love alone can lend you loyalty. A man who lacks love can scarcely be blamed for lacking loyalty. And the old dictum teaches us, you cannot love what you do not know. The man did not live by the pond. He could thus not know the pond. And if he did not know the pond, how could he love the pond? I left for work after that walk in a black mood. I had seen this act before, and I knew what it would yield: doom. That evening I came home late. But before arriving home, I stopped at the pond and parked to survey the damage. The sun was set, and there was only twilight on the pond, and the wind moving across the water. As I scanned the surface, I was surprised to see there was still water, an abundance of water, more than there had been in the morning. And then I saw, unmistakably, a V breaking the water. And then another V, and a third, and a fourth. Like a little fleet deployed, 4 beavers were quietly moving across the pond. And there were 4. This is a true story, Patrick. I watched in wonder as the 4, without any perceptible communication, but with clear communion of purpose, moved gracefully across the water, finding tree limbs and fallen wood, and they were restoring the dam in silence. Benedicite cete et omnia, quae moventur in aquis domino. Bless the Lord, all you creatures who move upon the water. Can we speak of such creatures and the question of loyalty and allegiance? Beaver have no free will, and so strictly, no. Without imagine, no, we cannot. But this is a vision of things absolutely true, things that truly happened. And so I say to you, this walk of mine illustrates the story of both loyalty and allegiance. On some natural level, the harmonious actions of these lower creatures prefigure for us what it will be like when we are free from sin and free for the good. Such things, like that vision, inspire me. I'm inspired by the vision of our 4 Irish, not all of whom are Irish. I'm inspired by you because I have watched over the course of my life other kinds of Irish, fools of men and quislings, spend all their time undoing the work of ages. I have watched Irish, and especially in New England, Irish Americans, lead the way in treachery and treason, usually with charm and a wink. And until this past autumn, my affection and hope for Ireland and all things Irish was really nothing but embers. But the 4 of you and the other 3 are a vision, a change in the wind, heralds of a quiet restoration. I'm not alone in such a conviction, nor are you, Irish, alone in such a vision. I believe, now I know that I speak for all seated behind me that teach at this tiny college, that we have a great blessing in you. This is absolutely true. After the soiree in the morning, my wife, who often says wise things, said, we woke up, we were sitting there, and she said, thinking in particular the whole evening, but she was prompted particularly by Hugh and Rian. And she said, they were like people from another time. Now this struck me immediately as interesting. She didn't say they were like people from the past. And that's important. To grow old and see the world so broken and dying is the fate of all men. But the teachers here, while we age, we are not surrounded by visions of decay, but by visions of hope. And you must realize that before you go. Loyalty is a thing lent by love. The deepest love is always for ordinary things. One cannot, or one should not, love the great abstract gods, career, popularity, power, and success. Love calls us to the ordinary things of the world. And the highest and noblest of loyalty will be found not in your 401k or your LinkedIn network, but in your capacity to do another person's laundry, to say thank you for a hasty meal, to endure a traffic jam for the sake of your daughter, to pray a distracted rosary for a friend who has wronged you. The world has already begun. It will continue, and it will intensify its request for your allegiance. But keep your love and loyalty for the good, ordinary, known things. If this campus and college is anything, it is this: a training ground in the romance of the ordinary. We may have sent you in mind, body, and soul to the ancient medieval world. We may have called upon you to go to the cobblestone streets of Rome, and some of you, Jerusalem. We may take secret delight in hearing about your escapades in Madrid, Krakow, Oxford. But we expected you to return, always, to this little 12-acre parcel of 5 buildings, a shed, dirt roads, and worn turf. There is nothing wicked about walking around the world and coming back to your own house, wrote Chesterton. In fact, there's everything right about it. And I'm sure if you had traveled the full length of the Amazonian jungle, your heart would have broken if you had heard about the loss of one old apple tree here in Merrimack. It was only because of a life dedicated to the most ordinary things: his wife, his children, his pets and garden, his parish. Only because of this that Thomas More could forsake those things in the end, while remaining utterly true to them. His love of 2 wives, one lost through death, allowed him to see that the idea of multiple wives was wrong. His carefulness in his children's education taught him the priority of virtue before scholarship, something lost on many humanists of his age. His love for his own garden and pets allowed him to defend an entire realm, though it was filled with men who behaved like animals. His attempts to attend every day, though he did not, he failed sometimes, but his attempts to attend every day, daily mass, in a shabby little local church, that allowed him to defend the entire communion of the Catholic faith and the ever-tarnished majesty of the papacy. His love for these ordinary things nourished a loyalty that could sustain allegiance with a fallen prince, and yet never at the price of compromise. His love of the daily made him the man for all seasons. So as you move forward today, you must bear witness to Christ in the most ordinary things. There you will be tested with temptation and treason. There you will find faith and fidelity. And if you can hold before you, now and again, the memory of an old barn, a rickety colonial house, and a scarred old apple tree, these concrete memories may lift you up to a higher image, the image of our patron, St. Thomas More, who ever rejoiced in loving the ordinary sweet gifts presented to him by God. Loyalty is lent by love. Now I will conclude, as I always have. It is the last austere act of the austere office of this college president to remind you of an irreducibly hard point of Latin grammar. You are no longer studentes, students, one studying, a present participle. You are about to become alumni, one's nourished, a past participle. It is irrevocable, and it begins now. God bless you, seniors. Desire the truth, know the truth, rejoice in the truth, and as you do so, remain in Christ, until I pray that, with our patron, we may merrily meet in heaven and find joyful reward for all our good loyalties. Now you may move your tassels, and you are now alumni.